I was wrong in doing what I did.
No, no! No! Are you listening?
Sean here. So out of curiosity, I did a little research because here in Kentucky, what we have a lot of times are two little cities that might be close enough to each other where they can combine their school systems. The exits where you go and you'll see like Sadieville and Pottsville or something on the same sign. The buses will go to the same place, wherever that is, whatever school it is that they've chosen, that they'll bus to. Some of the schools here in Kentucky, especially because like Eastern Kentucky, I told you, up in the hills, they do specials on how inbred they are. Some of the schools require grants because no teacher in their right mind is going to go to McKee or another city. Maybe McKee might have grown a little bit, but Estill, Powell County, out in the sticks, no teacher is going to go there unless they grew up there or unless they have some kind of I'm going to save the world mentality. It's a dead end, and they know it. Maybe you start in elementary. Maybe you move up to junior high, and high school is probably the furthest you're ever going to go. There are some exceptions. Places close to Campbellsville University, Morehead State, places like that. Kentucky State, that's near big cities, doesn't count. University of Kentucky doesn't count. Transylvania, all that stuff doesn't count. They're in big cities. However, in Cornville, with only 1,100 people, that's today, they are still getting grants. At least the people I've spoken to, that's their best guess. We all have friends that are teachers or friends that are in FFA, Future Farmers of America. If you've never seen a grown man cry because they go to a school, there's a county here, Scott County. There are 3 cities that kind of combined into like I wouldn't want to say a city, another bigger city, but they did have schools and they bused people in from way out in the sticks. They had grants. And a lot of the focus there was on farming, of course, because most of these families, they farm. Their main priorities are number 1, farming, number 2, livestock, and number 3, schooling. So schooling is not their top priority or their second priority because their families depend on them. And a lot of the farmers struggle here. So they also get grants, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the schools that get grants to try to educate these people. What happens if the farm goes under? What are they going to do? They have a lot of things to think about. Back to the point I'm making, you never seen a grown man cry until he walks into one of his old schools that he graduated from about 35 years ago, and he looks at you. He looks at you and he says, "Oh, that hallway right there used to be the FFA hallway. It was a huge hallway." It wasn't really that big. I saw the floor plan. It was a huge hallway. And you could go back there and there was FFA classrooms and FFA contests, and that's how big of a deal it was. And I'm not making fun of the guy, but yeah, I kind of am. But what I'm trying to say is it was a huge deal. It opened my eyes to how big it was back when that was necessary. It still is in some areas. I learned a lot from talking with people who grew up in that era. A lot of the MMA fighters, they started off in that rural area, Taylorsville, way out in the middle of nowhere. And then they came into the city. They got jobs themselves. Their parents stayed on the farms, but they respected them because they wanted to make something of themselves. And then they told me about the people who did not have farms, lived out there, and lived off the government. Cornville, I cannot get the accurate stats, and I'm going to apologize because I'm going to speculate. Much like East Liberty here in Kentucky, people want to get on the draw. They want to be on disability, and they want to live their life the lowest standard possible or the highest standard possible without working, lower standards to us. Tony was on disability, and Lorne would talk about how Tony, now I don't know if we can trust Lorne, and I'm not knocking Tony. I have no idea what his condition is, and if you stop working, your condition is going to get better. That's what disability is for, or that you can't work and support yourself. Some people, I swear to you, it's a miracle they get off disability. They spend their money and time rehab, so they can get better. But they want to get on the draw. And we talked about Lorne having role models. These kids are growing up. They see their parents, they sit at home all day smoking weed, and they're like, how can I get some of that? Something tells me the best teachers in the world aren't flocking to Cornville, Maine. Now, I don't know. If Lorne told me he grew up in Cornville, I would laugh at him. Because I have no reason to believe that anything this man says is the truth. He lied about his stepdad. We know that. And that changed everyone's perception of him. Well, we already thought he was a douchebag, but this is a guy crying in his 30s because his stepdad left me. Who he said he didn't even like, and then he said he liked him. Lorne loves then loathes. We grew up in Cornville. We were poor. My mom worked 9 jobs. For all I know, his mom could have been on disability. She could have had a good job, at least a decent job in Cornville, Maine, that she was able to provide for them, and his stepdad might have had a good job. But we'll never know, because the only person who's ever going to tell us the truth is probably one of his siblings that aren't in a drunken stupor or that haven't killed their brain cells like Roy and Lorne have. It is so difficult to decipher the truth about how he grew up. I still believe, because I've heard it from multiple sources, some of you guys and the person I spoke to, that he was handed his diploma. He won't admit it. He won't admit it. Other people can find out just like I did. Other people already know. He was handed his diploma, and I stand by my theory that Lorne had joined the military, gotten through, somehow passed the ASVAB. I 100%ed that motherfucker, and I think it's public record. I think if people wanted to check it out, hell, I might even be able to get it. The only thing I have right now is my DD-214. I think I even had a copy of my medical records from my service record book. Anyway, that test was not easy. It wasn't super hard. It wasn't like acing the SATs or the ACT or whatever. It wasn't that easy to ace, but it wasn't that hard compared to the others. See, this is why when Lorne tries to make it sound like he is smart, I die laughing. I graduated from the College of the Desert, the highest dropout rate in the country. 2.5 years of college in 12 weeks. Digital logic in 5 days. Test at the end of the 5th day. And this was back when computers, they made it way harder than it was. Transistors, if you failed twice, you were out. I had a girl in my class. I spent the entire 5 days of transistor learning, flirting with her and talking with her. So I failed the test, went back on Sunday. I got a 93%, I think it was, passed the test, never failed again, because there's no way. If you fail out, you're going to be a wire dog or you're going to be a radio operator. And there's no way, after going through everything I went through, that I was going to do that. So that ought to tell you something about where Lorne ended up, his job. That's what I'm getting at here. His education was shit, and I don't know if it's because he didn't apply himself or because he just didn't care, or maybe the schooling was that bad that it didn't compare to the rest of us. Inner city schools get grants, pretty decent grants, and teachers that want that job and want that equity score, they will go there. You never meant to go there, and they get paid decently. We're not talking private school money or big city money, but they can make a living and live well. I just don't think a teacher in Cornville, unless there are significant grants, which I think there were. I don't know if there are FFA grants, but I think there are grants there. I just don't know what kind of education Lorne would have had. I can't go back in time. I can't talk to anybody. All the teachers are dead, I'm certain. I would love to talk to one of his teachers still alive that could tell me, oh, Lorne, he was the dumbest kid in the entire school. Well, I would love to hear that. We know he was 87 out of 87. I mean, that's a no-brainer. If the story that a lot of us have been told is true, the recruiter going in and saying, because I didn't finish what I was saying before, the recruiter going in and saying, hey, look, he's joining the military, and in a lot of these small cities, even the big cities, it's important to some of these teachers who are veterans that this person gets in there because they know it changed their life. It sure as shit changed my life. I joined the Marine Corps because I know I needed it. And I did need it. But I think that Lorne's teacher probably said, okay, here's some extra credit for him. This will help him get a D in the class, which is why I think the story about him getting his diploma after the fact is true. I think he was given that diploma because he did the extra credit. It happened to a guy here named Billy. Really smart guy. I have no idea what the hell he was doing. I mean, he was probably like me, who just didn't give a shit and just wanted to get out of high school as quickly as possible. Spent his senior year partying, skipping classes. I'll never forget, Mr. Borschinger helps, I think I mentioned this before, helped save my dad's life. Got into an argument with him in class. He said, you come back, kicked me out of class and said, you come back when you're ready to act. I was gone for 80 something. Oh God, if it was 87, I'll die. And I went to Miss Kelly's English class, hung out there. A couple cheerleaders in there. They'd come in their uniforms. I'd be sitting at the desk. They'd put their feet up on my desk or my legs. Dude, I was in heaven. There was no way I was going back to Borschinger's class. And Miss Kelly was a hot teacher, and she was flirtatious. Not to the point where we were going to have sex or anything, but moving on. It was an interesting situation. So I never went back to his class. And I failed that class. I did for that semester. Now, I went to another teacher after that, but that dude never even checked on me. And I wonder sometimes, if I went to a school that was supposedly, AAA or whatever they call it nowadays, and that happened where the teacher's just like, I screwed up, I kicked this kid out of class, I'm not going to go look for him because then it'll get highlighted. And I hope he was sweating the whole time that I was going to go talk to the principal. But that happened at a AAA school. Shit like that happens. I don't know why Billy failed, but they gave him his diploma, much like I think they gave Lorne his. When I went in the military, I knew I had some serious training to do. And I knew my asthma that I hid, I told you. Perfect PFTs. I knew how to warm up. I knew how to hydrate, everything to make sure that I didn't have an asthma attack. Now, I did once, and I told you I covered it by helping somebody else who couldn't run. I knew what was ahead of me. I don't know if Lorne was prepared for what's ahead of him, because if that did happen where they helped him get his diploma, he would have just gone into the military and been like, okay, I'm good hand at everything. And they're like, look, we need the body. We need this guy to climb inside these fuel tanks. And I do 30% wonder, because I don't think about it much, but when we talk about this, I wonder if climbing inside of those tanks and cleaning them out in that enclosed area. I don't know if you've ever been in a bathroom with bleach. Sergeant Dixon, I think I mentioned it. I mean, he loved me to death, but he would fuck with me mercilessly. He made me guide. I mean, that was a sign of ultimate respect, but he fucked with me mercilessly. He put me in the drill instructor bathroom, closed the door because he didn't want to smell the bleach, which meant the bleach smell was in there. I was lightheaded. I had a headache. I swear to God, it felt like for 2 days. But I wonder if Lorne suffered some kind of damage from being in there with those strong fumes and killing brain cells, short on oxygen. I doubt it, because he was an 87 in high school, but it wouldn't shock me. We're also going to talk just for a second about the materials that they get. Without those grants, they're not getting the materials they need. My senior year, I brought in 3 boards, and I had a guy by the name of Chip, and there was another guy by the name of Dave, and they held them in the class. And the first time I just pushed him back with a step sidekick, because I wanted him to feel the pressure. I told you guys I was black belt in Taekwondo, which is like ordering a cheeseburger nowadays after knowing what I know. I pushed them back so people would see the power, and the second time I went through, folded Chip over. That was what we were doing in class. We were physics class, whatever, calculus, math, we were doing special projects. They really cared, and we had top-notch materials. Now, we didn't have like private school level materials, but I went to a big school and they had good funding. It was an interesting time being in a school that large, and it definitely prepared me for the size of the military bases. There were different buildings. I mean, it was just gigantic. And of course, in Cornville, it would be a little tube. He wouldn't have had that big school. He wouldn't have had the social skills I think that most of us had by going to bigger schools, dealing with lots of people, hanging out with the popular kids. going out and hanging out with the jocks, then going in and hanging out with special needs, and then going outside and hanging out with the hippies. I had friends, band geeks, everybody. I learned social skills on how to deal with different people. Now, what am I saying? Because in Lorne School, there were popular kids, but when you only have 87 people, supposedly, in your senior class, I mean, hell, in the school, there might have been 87 people. You only have 87 people in your senior class. You're not getting a lot of that interaction. Sorry for the pauses. I'm on a road here. I was looking at some idiot. You don't get a lot of interactions like we did. And again, the materials, mix that with not having the proper materials or having up-to-date school books, you're already behind. You're socially behind. And when you're awkward and dangerous like Lorne was, it's a recipe for disaster. As we always say, his whole life is a recipe for disaster. That could be the title of his movie. I keep moving the goalposts on that, of what the title needs to be. Speaking of goalposts, I love how Casey doesn't move her goalpost. And in school, the goalpost is set. They're not going to keep moving it. Okay, Lorne, now you passed, you got an A, but now I'm going to make it 10 times harder for you to get an A. Everyone has the same standards. Not everyone has access to the same, I guess, when you're doing science projects. If you don't and if your parents aren't educated, that's another problem, because they're the ones who help you with your schoolwork. And I help my son with his schoolwork. I'm not afraid to say that in terms of being book smart, their stepdad, he's a lieutenant colonel or colonel now, maybe. I don't know if he just got promoted. He's whip smart. I'll give you an example. This guy went through regular school, went through Army training, 3 weeks of being on the phone with Microsoft, with being in the smartest minds being around the smartest minds I could find, asking them how to get this program to work. This dude's on drill. Comes back, walks in. I said, "Thank God you were back. I have a question." "Oh, and this is true." "Oh, just do this." I walk back, boop, and it comes right back up, and we're off and running. And I'll never forget, I went into the general's office. Well, he's general select at the time, because he couldn't be in charge of where we were working as a general. He would have been put in a staff command. But he comes out. He was in staff command, a big one. But what I'm saying, the general can't be over top of where we were working. He comes out, and I gave him all the praise in the world. The guy who helped me, I gave him all the praise in the world. And I think I remember, he probably forgot this, but he pulled him in the office. He came out smiling. When you get an attaboy from the general, from the colonel at the time, that was a big deal. So that's how whip smart this guy was. Absolutely, absolutely brilliant. And it's because he worked hard and he had access to materials, to the proper training. Had Lorne gone into the military and gotten the proper training, had he gotten some kind of MOS or AOS, I think it's what they call it. The Marine Corps was MOS in terms of what your occupation was. If Lorne would have had an AOS or something that would have helped him, given him a real skill, welding even, for God's sake, welding, he would be in a much better place. But this is a guy who doesn't apply himself. He thought being in the military was enough. You know this is true. He thought being in there was enough. He didn't have to work hard. He got a job. He didn't have to push it. He never tried to better himself. I think I mentioned that before I was going to leave the Marine Corps. I was selected for the Mustang program, which is where enlisted become warrant officers, because I busted my ass and it was offered to me. But I told you before, I knew I had asthma. I didn't know how long I could hide it. So I turned it down. I decided to jump out into the real world, and I never looked back. Had Lorne been able to stay in the military, I do wonder what his tenure would be like. What would it have been? What would he have been doing? Would he have actually finished his 20 years and retired? I don't know. I have no idea. I can't imagine sending Lorne into war. That would also be a disaster. So his education will remain a mystery. I don't know. I don't have access to what he did. I don't know what their curriculum was. Some of you guys are smarter than I am. we'd never be able to get it out of him. He can't even remember what happened last week. He says, Lorne, what'd you learn in high school? Hard to get it hurt. Whatever that song is that I sing, he wouldn't be able to answer. I don't think he learned anything significant in high school. I don't think he paid attention. I think he saw it as something he absolutely had to do. He knew he had to graduate or he'd be stuck in school, and he doesn't like restrictions. He doesn't like rules. Now, he probably enjoyed the mandatory interaction that he had to have with people that are trapped in school with him. I just think he saw it as a means to an end, wanted to get it done, wanted to move on. Then he found out about the military. We're going to pay for your meals. We're going to pay for your training. We're going to pay for your lodging. I think that was the first education that Lorne might have paid attention to, because it was supposedly a free ride. Maybe that's why prison works for him. Same system. Forced to live by certain standards, free food, not free, you know what I mean, food and lodging, and mandatory interaction. Or the only interaction he could have is people trapped in there with him. That's my video. I love you guys. I will see you in the next one.
Hang on, I can't even catch my breath. Hang on.